I'd expect most of you guys are using VRM every day, or at least close to it. Your customers potentially using it. And what I found with things I use every day, I get to know them the way that I use them. And then if a new feature gets added, I might not necessarily notice it. And so we're adding some really powerful stuff to VRM constantly. And these are a good review to make sure you guys are using it to its full potential. We're very lucky to have the guests here today. Myself as the host. Thanks for joining. Also Alex, who's one of the developers of VRM. Barbara, who's working on the team there as project management. Yeah, Matthias, of course, our management at Victron. And Mark, one of the developers, as well as working on one of the features. We'll all be presenting today the features that we're closest to. But if we're now ready, I can hand over to Matthias.
Good morning, everybody. And thank you, Guy, for your kind introduction. Yeah, as you all know, the VRM portal is one of our main projects where we continuously invest and see what we can improve. And this meeting today is to show a few of the recent improvements. To get straight on it, one very nice one is that now, at least on an Apple iPhone, users can see the status of their system without having to unlock the phone. You can take the phone, light up the screen by touching it, and then you can see one of 5 parameters. You can configure that lock screen to show the main data of your system. And the key term here is an iPhone lock screen widget. That's what the users need to search for on how to configure that. They can choose between battery state of charge, PV power, grid power, power of their loads, of course, and both for AC and DC loads. And this slide shows a few screenshots on how it then looks. You see the standard lock screen of a phone with the time and the date. And then below that, the configured widgets that show the status of the Victron system. So as said, this is available for Apple, and Android will be adding this toward the end of the year. We need to wait for Android as an OS to support it. And once they do, of course, we need to add it. But we'll be keen to do that as soon as possible. And then next, for smartwatches, we've done something very similar. So on a smartwatch, and I don't have one, I'll have to admit, but on a smartwatch, there's the faceplate. And on the faceplate, you can see the time and the date. But then as a user, you can configure other information that you'd like to see there. Very common is that people there show the weather or show information from their electric car, how full the car is, or other data they want to see without having to open the actual app. And now it's also possible there to see data from your Victron system. Similar set of parameters, state of charge, actual PV power, grid usage, loads. And here there's two photos showing how that looks. And on community, we've asked people to show and to send us photos of how they have configured their smartwatch to show this data. And lots of creative configurations by people. Super exciting to see. So this works on all smartwatch platforms. So this works on Android, Apple, Garmin, and is available since 1 or 2 months. Next topic is AI. Yeah, so AI had the big topic everywhere with ChatGPT, LLM, and at Victron, we're constantly seeing where we can use AI and where not. Now, there are many possibilities, but also many places where it's not useful to use AI. But one where I think AI really adds value is when it comes to use a more complex tool. And VRM can be seen as that more complex tool. The VRM portal is super powerful. You can see lots of data. In the advanced page, you can configure all your graphs. You can zoom in and out with the data picker and analyze your Victron system. But all in all, it's a complex tool. And what is super nice of AI is that it allows to use such a complex tool without having to fully know it or understand it or be familiar with it. Basically, you can ask a question and show me the state of charge together with my battery voltage. So you just ask what you want, hit enter, and the AI model makes you the graph. And if you then want it a little bit different, you can tell it what you want different, and it will do its best for that. And as a user, that is so much nicer than having to know where every button is and how it all works exactly. It allows you to use such complex tools without being totally familiar to them. And to me, That's really a good insight and a place where AI can add a lot of value, because we have these complex tools, and it would be great to unlock them to more people and to the users that are not using them every day and are totally familiar with. That's my introduction for AI. Mauk is here, one of the lead developers of this, of the AI integration into VRM. So welcome, Mauk.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Mauk. I'm a data scientist and I specialize in various AI projects for Victron. And as was introduced, one of the projects that we're working on is a tool that can help you make widgets through natural language in the VRM platform. You may be familiar with the widget page here. Some of you may or may not know, but there is this little button in the bottom that you can press, which brings you to a page, a chat for which you can interact. Currently, you can only make widgets through this chat, but I'll quickly just demo a little bit. So maybe you've made widgets before, maybe not. If you're not sure what kind of widgets you can make, we can ask it, for example, what can I make a widget of? The system will think a little bit, and the system has context of both your devices and the attributes that it has. For example, if we want, we can ask it, we have a temperature sensor, so we can ask it, can we plot the temperatures from our temperature sensors? And we'll have to think a little bit. So after we ask this, we have 3 devices actually that are temperature sensors. We have our outdoor meter cabinet and living room temperature. I'll feature some of the capabilities that the agent has with editing and updating graphs. So for example, we have red and blue lines, but if we want to change the colors, just like in the widget creation, we can ask it like, can we change red and blue line to say orange and magenta? Let's see if it can figure that one out. Yeah, so we can have it change the colors through natural language. So the red and blue line have been changed to orange and magenta. After we create a widget, we can also still add and remove elements. So this temperature sensor also has humidity. So maybe we can ask it, can we also plot the humidity? Yeah, and as you can see, besides the temperature being plotted, also the humidity has been added for this sensor. So after adding parameters, we can still add more to it, but we are also able to reduce the amount. So imagine maybe we're only interested in the sensors inside of our house, so not outdoors. We can ask it, I'd only like to see the measurements for indoor sensors. And then because we're working with natural language here, it should be able to understand that we should remove the outdoor sensor. So we only keep the meter cabinet and the living room sensor, both the temperature and the humidity still. And we are also able to adjust the scaling on the y-axis. So we can ask it, for example, to scale everything between 0 and 100. Right now, we see there's a separate scale for both the temperature and the humidity, from 8 to 80 and 18 to 72. If we ask it to scale everything from 0 to 100, it would put everything on a singular scale. We can also ask it to adjust the ticks on the y-axis. Right now we have a tick every 10, maybe we want them every 5. So can we double the amount of ticks on the y-axis? It will then also be able to adjust the granularity that we have on the y-axis. We are also able to have an individual scale for each separate attribute. So we can ask it, for example, can we scale the humidity from 0 to 100 and the temperature from, let's say, 0 to 30? It will then also be able to set a separate scale for both the humidity and the temperature. So as you can see here, there's 2 scales, two from 0 to 100 and from 0 to 30. And lastly, we can also change the title of the widget. So can we change the title to, let's say, measured indoor values? It will then also be able to change and set the title to our liking. Measured indoor values. So once you are happy with your widget, you can add it to the advanced page with the button below. And when we go to the advanced page and we scroll down, we can see that our widget has been created. And just like any other widget, you can edit this after saving it, and you can still make any changes that you are used to. If you have experience with the widget tool, you can still change the scaling of the y-axis, you can add more attributes, change the colors, etc. And you can also, because you can have multiple chats, we can go back to the AI assistant page and we can see that the chat that we just talked with has been saved. Yeah, that concludes the demo a little bit. Of course, because this is AI, it can make mistakes. Please keep that in mind. But if you give us feedback, we will always continue to iterate on it to make sure that it gets better and better. We are also working on some other tools that the AI can do. For example, like a sort of statistical side where you can ask it questions. For example, how much solar did I produce last week? Or what was my consumption in the month of March? That will be able to answer questions like that. And we are also working on a knowledge side of the agent where you can ask it general questions about VRM. So those are some things that we are working on in the future that hopefully we can also show quite soon. So that's it for the demo. Any questions, comments?
Thank you, Mark. That's awesome. What I'm going to do, I will open the floor a little bit to questions and comments. What I'm also going to do is open a poll, which is going to ask the audience what they'd like to be able to do with the AI. I'll just launch that now. Okay, so I'll leave that open in the background. If you guys can think about from what you've just seen, what other things would you like to do? This is obviously a very active development for us, where we're going, and it'd be good to know where we prioritize it. What's the most interesting and useful features that we can have? So please submit those and I'll pass them on and we can use it to inform the development process. All right, there are some questions in the chat. I'll introduce them. But if they don't, then I'll ask it for them. So Rune's asking, can it make the same widget to multiple installations?
That's a good question. So currently these chats, they are bound to a singular installation. So the chat only has context of one installation. So if you make the widget for that installation, it's only that one. But we are also looking into how the chat can be adapted. That's maybe it's like account bound. And then you could ask it, like, could you generate this widget for multiple installations? But that capability currently doesn't exist.
Yeah.
One nice
Copying widgets over from one installation to another and managing that is part of fleet management. Relay has a lot of systems that are all the same. So they're producing a product where Victron is inside and lots of them all the same, and they manage them all and they want all their advanced pages to look the same. And and not
we have tools
copying it all over all the time.
Yeah, I think this is meant more as a fast action tool and a discovery tool for people. So power users, they might still use this occasionally to get into a site that they're using, but it's not going to replace the traditional widget control for everything. It's just another option to make it more available for people.
Yeah. I think personally, I also expect that I'm going to use it. If I want something and I'm, with half of my mind somewhere else or in a problem and I just want something, I expect that it's, super nice to just be able to tell it what you want without having to go through the step of thinking about how to do it and what parameter was it again that gets me that info best and this and that. It requires a lot less focus to get what you want. I'm excited about this.
And then my question, you said tell it. Now you have to type it. It would be nice to be able to really tell it.
But in the meantime, you can use your dictation features of your phone. Instead of typing, you can press the microphone. Most keyboards have that, so you can tell it already and then just press submit. So although it's not part of VRM, it's already a way to interact using your voice with the AI widget creator.
Yeah. I think what I've seen with these tools, the big advantage of using these AI bundles is you get the features that they're developing at the bigger scale eventually along for free. So what we've done here is begin to build the infrastructure to connect these AI tools into VRM. And we're going slowly because we want to be careful and make sure that, well, it's useful. It's not just silly and making mistakes and just not even good value. But what's going to happen is as these tools get more and more powerful, such as things like back and forth conversation, then yeah, it's not anything Victron really has to do except turn it on, and it's part of the tool set, and then it can tap into that system. Another question that came up was what languages does it support? And that's the same answer. It's really nice that probably all of them, because we're using these leveraged LLM tools. So if it knows the languages like most of them do, because it's trained on the Internet of Data, then you can probably speak to it in any language and it'll probably do really well. But please let us know. Try it out. We haven't tested all the languages. We trained it in English. I guess you guys will be training in Dutch a bit, and that seems to work pretty well.
We've already seen users interact with it in quite some different languages, and as far as we know, that's been going. So yes, it supports quite some languages.
There's one question which perhaps is nice to touch on a bit. It asks, will AI be able to assist in fault finding? So yeah, that would be super valuable, of course. Who knows? It requires, it's a bit more in-depth than this first step, but definitely that's on our radar to explore where it could help. Yeah.
Guys, Jason from Childers Batteries down in Australia.
Yeah, right.
I asked the question, can we use AI to do a lot of data analysis, especially with things like battery degradation over time? I have systems that are 4 years, 5 years old, and some of those lithium packs are now down at about 40% capacity. But the only way I can really determine that is take them out of the system and do a capacity test. But we're logging all of this data. Is there a way that we can ask AI to crunch those numbers for us?
You said that the data is being logged, but is this logged in like just dumps of logs, or are the values actually being written like the numbers to like some database? Because if you have the numbers, you might not need an LLM in order to perform such an analysis.
Yeah. So we are not logging state of health for the battery. So this question worded differently is, can AI analyze the parameters that are being logged into the database and then determine state of health and then degradation of state of health from that, which would be super nice, but that is also not something that is now possible.
Not today. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely something we're mindful of too, right? We have a big store of data here in VRM. And for a really trained technician who puts the time in and spends the hours, they can learn a lot about a system from reading all that data. But would be much nicer is to have someone train the system, just click it and tell me a summary, tell me what the system's doing, give me ideas. Of course, we're thinking about this. We have to be a little bit careful for lots of reasons with how we do this. We want to really control the data. Like, we don't want to give your data away. Basically, that's a big one. So we want to work out how we're going to manage the control of the data so that what you've already approved to give Victron permission to do, that doesn't leak out any further. That's not what we want to do. That's been a big consideration in the design of these tools, to make sure that we're very compartmentalized with customer data that never leaves Victron. And then we only let out this sort of anonymized data to render the query, if we've got a better sense of that. And then we bring it back again and then apply it to the data again. So there's a bit of a round hop situation to manage that in the back end. Yeah, as a user, you don't see any of that, but it's definitely something we're conscious of in these design things. And that affects what we can do, because we have to think about how we get the data into these systems, anonymized, process it, and send it back. But we're working on it. And I think in the long run, for sure, it's going to happen. Just how long it's going to take, no one knows. All right, so there's a good question there from Thomas asking, is it possible not to have AI? But you just don't use it, Thomas. Then that's the same thing. Like, none of the AI has anything to do with your data or anything if you don't click the button. If you don't click the button, and it's not doing anything for you. It's not reading any of your data. It's not anywhere. It's just, you have to summon it for it to work. And of course, it's our preference, but you don't use it. It costs Victron money each query. So if you don't like it, don't use it. It's fine. If it saves you money and it makes you feel better about Victron, then use it, enjoy it. But it's also fine with us if nobody uses it. No problem.
Yeah. That's not happening. The people that have used it are using it more and more. So what we've seen is that people that discovered the feature are really liking it and are using it a lot.
Yeah, there's a quick question covered by a couple of people. how long does Victron keep VRM data? There's two answers to this question. There's shorter term data, which is the full resolution data. That's the per minute or per 15 minute or maybe per hour data of all the data points in the system. That's in the advanced page. That data is kept for 6 months at this stage. The other data, the full system data of kilowatt hours, your solar production, your battery state of charge, your kilowatt hour consumption yourself, the one on the dashboard, that's kept for a minimum of 5 years. And it actually longer. So we haven't purged that data yet. So it makes sense. And it's nice to have this full system history from the dashboard. But all of those individual data points in the advanced, that's currently for 6 months. That's the way it's always been for VRM. So every so often somebody discovers this and they get a little bit like, oh, I thought I was keeping it forever, no matter what. No, never has been. But yeah, it's something we look at. It's a big question for Victron and for VRM, because what's happening is the number of users using VRM is going up. It's growing. And not just the numbers getting bigger, it's getting bigger faster. So we have a huge database to work with. That's good. We can manage that growth. We're building for it and we're designing around it. But to then increase the amount of data that's required to be stored in that database, as well as the database itself growing, that's a bigger problem. And I don't think we've yet got to the point where we're saying, okay, we have unlimited resources. We can now just turn it on the data and leave it forever. That's fantastic. Maybe someday we can expand it, but for now, that's the limitation.
Yeah, and then the logical next question, if we can do this for a cost, if we could do it easily, then it would have already been done. So one thing we need to do is add an option to pay. Well, that's actually being worked on. So we can do such features, but then to make the database such that it can store data for a long time for some systems and for a short time for another system is not so easy. Let's see. We are very well aware that this is an often asked question. I think that's the
yeah. And if we're going to change it, we're going to make a nice solution. So we're not going to just do something quick. So we think about how's it going to work with people with lots of systems and customers and lots of users. But we're working on it. We're thinking about it. And I'd say we're closer than ever, but still not close.
But it would help a little bit if you're typing in the chat anyway, is to type there what data you're looking for then. What data do you want to see for more than 6 months? And it can't be your solar production because that's already stored for 5 years. And it can also not be your state of charge because that's also stored for more than 5 years already. So what information do you want to see for more than 6 months that now is only available for 6 months? That would help us.
Yeah.
Personally, I'm not interested in my battery voltage of a year ago. But there are data points that are very interesting to have more than 6 months. I'm very well aware of that. But to have your view on that would really help.
So I think we're coming up to Alex next. Alex, if you're ready to
Yes.
present.
Start by sharing my screen then.
Thank you.
Hello everyone. Today I would like to show you a feature called keyboard navigation in VRM. It's a feature that's been requested for quite some time and by many of you, and it's also in line with what more and more applications out there offer to their users, especially on the web. So when you are on a page in VRM, let's say on all installations, you can press Command K. And then this pop-up shows it's contextual, meaning that if you are on all installations, this is a search bar. You can search for all the information that you are already familiar with in the search. I will search for my name. Then you get a list of sites. You can go up and down that list using your keyboard, and you can select one installation that will navigate to that specific installation. Now that you're in the context of this single installation, you can press Command K again, and then you get a list of menu items that you can navigate between. Maybe you're interested into alarms, and then you want to see all the alarms of that system, or you press Command K again, and you want to check something on the dashboard really quick, or maybe you want to change some settings. So all these options allow you to quickly navigate between items, as well as going all the way back, which I will present later, but here you have an overview over all the sites. And if you identify a site that has an issue or a problem, then you can again press Command K and go to that specific site. By closing this loop, so being able to dive deeper into a site or going all the way back to the overview, it allows to quickly debug, monitor, and check different sites easier and faster, which hopefully provides a a better way to use VRM and makes your life easier. So that's the feature.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, I'll just reiterate what you're saying. What I've found myself is that I become more error prone with the mouse, especially as I get more and more installations in my system. Sometimes the menus move around and things like that when I'm moving through it. The Command K allows me to be very decisive in where I'm going, and I make less mistakes if I'm trying to be fast and the page is still loading. I encourage you, if you do have many systems or you find yourself being frustrated with the interface, to give it a go. It'll require a bit of training in the beginning because you're used to knowing where things are with the mouse and clicking around, but pretty quickly, once you know how the menu structure of the Command K works and how it works in terms of using the VRM, I think you'll find it's a much faster way to use the site. So I'm going to be talking about how we're simplifying multi-site management of VRM. Now, this is a real cross-site approach. To give a bit of a background about what happened, when we first started with VRM, it was really oriented around a single user's experience, a single site experience. And yeah, pretty quickly that people started to add multiple sites to that. They started to grow their fleets out, but we expanded from a single site beyond. And in the last few years, what we've really reoriented and refocused around is people have many sites. So the single user site, the single site experience for people is quite good. It's quite powerful and yeah, for most parts, pretty satisfying. But when you start to get dozens of sites, already the site begins to become a little bit different and you want to start doing different things. So instead of just seeing a single site information, you want to start seeing what's happening overall. And to see all of those overall by going through each individual site is very slow and tedious. And what will actually happen is you won't do it eventually. You're not going to be checking each individual site. When you move to 100 sites, it becomes impossible. You can't be going to every individual site on a regular basis unless VRM in some way tells you to do that. We now have people with thousands of sites, and soon enough, we'll have people with tens of thousands of sites inside VRM. And what we really need to now do is think about how do we rethink about how people are designing their systems and how we're designing our system to give them the information they need from that VRM portal so we can continue to grow as they grow their businesses. One method, a feature we launched last year, which we'll be in a way relaunching in the near future, is groups and teams. It was pretty ambitious using groups and teams to restructure how we organized people and organized systems and organized their employees. One of the things we discovered was that people were using a single login to handle lots of different systems. That's obviously really undesirable for lots of reasons, most especially being security in the long run, but even just management of how people get control of systems. And what we're going to do in the future is move forward to enforce better user management and better site management. But we're also going to give you better tools to do that. So the one I'm going to show you right now is how we're going to simplify multi-site management with this new fleet dashboard. If you've got 10 systems, this is probably not news to you because this feature was turned on, I think maybe 3 or 4 months ago, could even have been a little bit longer than that. If you have less than 10 systems in VRM, you won't have seen this site before. And it's something for you in the future when you've got enough sites to go in there. And the idea behind here is that when you load up VRM for the first time, it's going to elevate the sites you need to see to the top of the list for some reason or another. And what we're trying to work out now, and I'll launch a poll in a moment, is trying to work out what other features you'd like to see in this fleet dashboard overview. But to explain it briefly, the top 2 panels here are the number of last 24-hour alarms and the total active alarms right now. These can begin to be like a pulse on how your systems are going. And you'll get to know that if you've been visiting the site every day, you'll get a sense about, is there an issue basically emerging from across my fleet, or is there anything popping up? And of course, there's a graph underneath that shows you how you're dealing with these. Yeah, ideally, I'm showing you a nice demo here of my linked systems which have problems, but ideally you get this down to 0 and it stays there. And then any emergent site that has alarm issues, you can investigate there very quickly and it rises to the surface. These alarms are the generic alarms you're used to knowing about, the ones that like a battery's got a low state of charge or something like that, or some other site situation you should be aware of. If I scroll down, you'll begin to see these little window boxes. We ran through probably about a dozen options for what these are. And to best explain, these are taking data from across all sites linked inside your VRM and analyzing some of those key data points that we think could be useful for you to know. Now, one that's actually settled down quite nicely, I'm hearing less and less issues about it these days, but for a while I was hearing a lot, was cell balance imbalances. As people's systems inside VRM become more and more lithium dominated, and as lithium battery manufacturers are figuring out how they manage what is actually a very natural process, which is that over time, the cells inside a lithium battery are drifting in and out of balance, and the battery itself has to manage to bring them back into balance one way or the other. This usually happens at the top of state of charge. But sometimes it never happens and then leads to problems. Sometimes you've got a bad cell and it never comes back up or it never drops back down. And then this view here shows the differential between the highest and lowest cells inside your system. And if you see this begin to emerge for a site, you've probably got something going on. One of the features we offer is this pin here. So if you want to make sure the system stays to the top, you want to keep an eye on it. And even if these values are fluctuating up and down, you can pin it to the top here and you'll see it later. Likewise, another feature of this is that if you don't want to see a site anymore, you can snooze it and it disappears. It actually pops down to the bottom of the list and says, okay, this is a problematic site. I can't deal with it now. I don't want to deal with it now or whatever. I don't want it muddying up my notifications to say. Then you can decide, I don't want to see it anymore. Just snooze it, send it to the bottom. You undo the snooze and it'll pop back up to the top. Some of the other options we've got here, battery voltage mismatch. Now, this is, to explain it a little bit, this is one of the key problems that I see in systems where it's a very unknown situation, but it's acting in a confusing way. And what it actually means is inside a Victron system, we've got multiple devices that are reading battery voltage at any one time. Now, that's a confusing thing because they're often quite a little bit different. They should be close, but what'll happen is if there's a big solar charger, its voltage will rise lower or higher than the battery voltage as it's charging and the voltage rise happens. Likewise, if you've got a big load on, the inverter charger voltage might draw down a little bit, and all that's normal. What's not normal is sometimes you'll have a fuse blow inside that system along that DC bus, and you'll have a divergence in the voltages. And it can be very confusing why that happens. You might get ripple alarms from an inverter charger, and you think, oh, there's a problem with my inverter charger, it's broken. No, it's not. It's just a fuse is blown inside it. And if you see that divergence in battery voltage between your different components inside your system, specifically between the BMS and the inverter charger, they're the two main ones we've selected for, then that can be a clue that there's some fault in the system that's not necessarily a fault in the products themselves, but maybe in the DC system, and something needs to happen. The reason why this is here is because these issues can often hobble along. So a customer system, especially if they're grid connected, they can just get all these weird error messages that things aren't working properly and vague problems, but it's actually very clear what the problem is, and you assume the inverter's broken or something like that. It's a way to give clue to those, even potentially before the customer notices it. Yeah, battery temperature is another one. It's a safety issue as well, both high, and of course you can click the top here and sort to low. So in very cold climates, you don't want batteries to be very cold because that's going to affect their charging speed, especially lithium batteries. You don't want batteries to be very high either. That's a fault situation as well. If you see a system consistently high, well, that battery is going to die prematurely. Basically, it's going to age out, and it's a good idea to control that. So good to know. Another box here we have is solar production compared to forecast. This was our best first attempt at trying to solve the problem of what happens if a string fails in a multi-string system on Victron. So that could be quite an obscure, hard to identify issue because the system's still producing power, it's still making PV, but the PV's dropped. And what this does is uses one of our other tools, which is the forecasting model that assesses how much PV should be on this site based on previous performance and how much is there now. Now, this one is not directly a fault because lots of reasons that this could happen. It's just a bit of information, and it's definitely something we're going to tune over time. We also have other ideas for how we're going to better solve this problem of what happens when a string fails and you don't notice it because the data's hidden. It's maybe you lose 10% of your performance or even 20 or 50% of your performance, but that's not necessarily clear because that could also just be a bad weather event. So we're looking at other ways we can improve that same issue to help you better manage your fleets. Yeah, for lots of people, it's fine. They might notice it when their battery's not getting properly charged and figure out that they need to do something. But if you're on some kind of performance guarantee where you've promised a customer to have a certain amount of performance or uptime or production, then tools like this become really valuable. The next two, generator features. So generator inactiveness. Why isn't this generator running? Maybe there's something wrong with it. A chance to investigate it. Or if it's running too often, it's also something to be figuring out why. The generator service expiration. Last year we presented generator service maps. I won't show you that to you just yet, but basically you can then see your whole fleet of generators. This is very useful to some of you in the room, not useful at all to others, but you can begin to see at an overview to begin to plan what your generators are doing. This is another feature to help you in that process. So you can begin to see in a list view what the generators' times are like and if any of them are getting close. This will go red if they're overdue. Last one is disconnected devices. You may have seen this. This needs a bit of a cleanup. Basically, if the system no longer sees a Victron connected device that it had seen historically, then it'll realize that and pop it into this list. Now, a lot of the times that's normal. If something's been removed, you've uninstalled a multi-plus or you've reinstalled an MPPT or something like that, and then you just need to clean it up afterwards. But sometimes it can indicate a part that's failed, especially with lots of MPPTs. So if you see a bunch of MPPTs appear here, or maybe there's something wrong with its communications or something needs to be investigated. One thing I will say about this, all this information is presented to you as a fleet operator with the intention that you can decide what you need to do with it. We're very mindful not to present end customer alarms and alerts if it's a non-critical situation. So we don't want customers to be hassling installers about things that maybe are just normal behavioral situations that as an installer, it's useful to know, as a system designer, it's useful to know, but we don't want to be popping up lots of alerts and alarms if we can help it. That's usually a last resort when action really needs to be taken and someone hasn't noticed. What we're trying to do here with these tools is give you guys the tools so that you can stop the situation before that happens, ideally. So the customer may never even know that something's happened. You may choose to notify them, or you may analyze what's going on and understand in advance. It's just designed to make your lives easier, so it's less reactive and a bit more mindful about how your fleet's performing and what you need to do about it. All right. That's all from the fleet overview. Okay, a question here from Miro asking, are you considering pulling data, let's just say from external data sources, not just Victron information? Yes, we are interested in doing that. We have nothing to announce on that today, specific to any integration partner, but it's something to say that we're not just looking within our own system, we're also looking to external parties. You will have seen this across our product range. So we've recently launched a new product called the GX.io Expander, which allows you to connect other products in. There's also other digital switching tools that we've connected to. Basically, what Victron's looking to do, generally speaking, is become more of a central point of attention for people, that mainly around their power system, but also around other things that connect into their power system, and we're supporting that. And yeah, there's some tools which you can help in with VRM, but also through the rest of the fleet. All right, so a comment from Rune saying he doesn't see himself using this. It'd be really interesting to see here, what would you be wanting to see here that you aren't, or what does it show that you don't want to see? That would be really interesting information for us. We've done our best to work it out from what I've done, basically what analysis I've done over the years. A question here saying, can we have a feature to be able to message the system owner? Email is the obvious one, right? You can, as someone who has access to the system, you can access the settings. Inside the settings, you can see the users who have access to that site. You can see their level of control, basically, whether they're full owners, whether they're read-only, whether they're technicians. And from there, you've got an email address, and from there, you can access emails. We have discussed adding more controls and, let's say, more customer relationship tools inside VRM. At this stage, we're not moving forward with any of those features. Maybe in the future, something will happen to help better manage that. For now, what we've found is most people have resolved that for themselves. They already have a system in a way to manage it. And what we want to be able to do is have VRM communicate as best as we can with that system. So I'll explain the feature a little bit initially. VRM is super powerful for seeing lots of information about a system, but where it ends is when you need to change specific settings for a system. You can change controls. You can adjust the state of charge that the ESS system comes in and out, quick things like that. But if you want to dig in a bit deeper, here's a system of mine. We have a new feature available. It's accessible inside the device list on the left-hand side here. And if you open up the device list, you'll see the option here, open in Victron Connect. If I open in Victron Connect, you'll get a message saying, yeah, would you like to give this system access to Victron Connect? It then opens up Victron Connect, opens up the site. You can see the site here linked in, opens up the specific device that I selected. This is the Multi-RS 6000. You can see it right there matching. And what's happening now is that it's downloading the settings. This little cloud spinner up the top right. First thing that's going to come in is the status. That should load in a moment. Now, it takes a little while. Let's say it's sped up in the video, but it's much faster than going out on site, that's for sure. Sitting here with it loading up, I guess probably me, first it's going to show us these status items. This is all the specific data for that site. And then now you can also see the settings. There's a firmware update for this product. I could remotely update the firmware here if I wanted to, but otherwise I can head through and adjust settings for my Multi-RS, via Victron Connect. It's a super powerful feature. It's very handy. I use it all the time because the alternative for me would have been walking out to my shed and then getting my phone out and tapping it through. Here I can access this anywhere in the world. Even if it's just the difference between here and the shed is very handy. It's also handy as an installer. If you have a customer that needs to access a site, you can do it this method. This feature was available previously and is still available. You don't need VRM as such to access it. So if you open up Victron Connect, normally there's 2 tabs here, a local tab. Well, I can see my Serbo GXs, which are connected to the local network, but the Bluetooth isn't strong enough on the multi-RS, which is in the shed. To access that, I can head to the VRM tab, and then I see all my VRM systems in there. I can access those. But this list and this method isn't, to me, as intuitive as opening up with VRM. That's just where I am. When I think about my fleet level view, I think VRM, and then this tool allows me to hit in there and access it. There's one thing I'll say. If you find when you click this Open in Victron Connect button, you get an error message saying the site's not online for some reason. That can happen because it worked straight up this time. If that happens because the site hasn't connected to Victron Connect in time before the message goes through, just leave Victron Connect open, and then you can click any of the sites and it'll open up immediately. It still has to do the downloading of the settings setup, but otherwise, that's how it works. It would be nice to hear from anyone who's using this on a regular basis. The next thing, it's a new feature. It's a niche feature. Let's say it's only really for OEMs. That's people who are making lots of Victron systems who are, they need to add, let's say 10 at a time or more. Let's say they do a batch of 50 of their installations that go out and they don't want to have to individually type in each code. They have some system where they can scan those codes and then put it in. We have a new tool available through the front end called Batch Upload. If you add an installation as you normally do, maybe you've already seen it, up the top right, there's a button called Batch Upload. If you click that, what you'll see is this screen, and this will allow, you can do this yourself now, you haven't got any sites to access or add, it's fine. Basically, the model is that you download an Excel page template. The template's very simple. It's basically just the VRM portal ID at the top, installation name second, and then the tag you want to use for the site. You copy and paste, or however you imported all of your VRM IDs, and you're typing the installation name, however you've done that, and the tags you want to use, and then you can click Add Installation. What will happen is you'll see them. It'll import them without adding them yet and add them to this list, and you can see if they're valid. If they're invalid, it'll go red and tell you why. Maybe the portal ID doesn't exist, or there's some other bug or issue, and you can correct the issue or not, and then you can add the installations, and they'll all be added to your site automatically. It's a nice feature. It was made specifically for an OEM who was doing this a lot and asking us to help him roll out things. What we actually found, because it took us a while to make it, and this is something I want to mention about a few different Victron features, is when we make a feature for Victron, for all of our customers, it has lots of considerations. It has to really work for everybody. And we're quite mindful now not to add needless complexity or extra features or extra buttons or everything we can, to solve everyone's problems. We really think about, is this important for everyone to see? How can we do it without adding extra complexity to the interface? And sometimes, even if it's a good feature for a particular small user, we can't justify adding it to everybody across all the interfaces and then managing it with settings and controls. It just makes the whole thing too complicated and too complex. And we're really consciously trying to keep things as simple as we possibly can while adding the features we want to add. So that brings me to the next topic, which is consider the VRM API. The thing about the API is that Node-RED, it's a super powerful feature that Victron's enabled that lets you do lots and lots of things with the Victron system that's well beyond what we supported and what we make for our customers. But it means that you can access the lower levels of your system and interpret them how you'd like them to do it, port it into other systems. It's a good example of a way the VRM API was used recently. Was a customer had a fleet of systems that was on an island, and there was a storm coming in, regular storms on the island. They wanted to be able to set the system so that all of their connected systems would charge from the grid when they got the storm alert alarm. Now, instead of going individually through each site and turning on, charge my batteries rather than normally cycle them through an ESS system, they want to be able to do that once, just click one button, and then all of their storm systems would be automatically switched to charge up automatically until that happened. Then when the storm had passed, they go back, click a button, revert them back to their normal setting. That's the kind of powerful thing that we can't build for VRM or haven't yet built in for VRM that makes sense that you can do through the API. Another thing that was built in the API, is the reason I'm bringing it up now, is because the customer who initially asked us to build the batch upload feature eventually built their own batch upload feature better for them using our API. Just keep it in mind, if you are using something with VRM, you're frustrated, maybe it doesn't do what you want to do, you've asked Victron and Victron hasn't come up with the goods, we haven't delivered the feature yet, there's an opportunity that potentially you could do it yourself and roll your own using the API. AI has already come up once today, but the AI programming tools are actually extremely powerful. People have used ChatGPT and other better models as well. It knows the API. You can teach it the API. You can send it the website, the VRM API website, which you can find by Googling Victron VRM API. You can send that to the AI and say, hey, learn this. And then you explain to it what you want to do, and it can start to help you. If that's even too much, you can go into the Victron community. We have an active community of developers, and people have actually posted their API code. So you begin to get a sense about what people are doing and how it works and how you can get started. I think what I'm seeing happening basically is there's a stratification that's happening in the market, and the installers and the distributors that are really getting to know the products very well, who know these power user features, they're going to have a much better time attracting customers and retaining customers when they can meet more customer needs. It basically unlocks a part of the market for you of people who need customized solutions. Another example might be you want to build a specialized public aggregated dashboard for systems. That's something you might be able to do with an API that we don't offer. We have a sharing feature, but it's not as powerful and customizable as something you could make yourself as a dashboard, and this could be a way to do it. So that's from me. I will now pass over to our next speaker, Barbara, who's the product manager, to give a little bit of a sneak peek about what's happening next. I'll say everything now has been released and is available. What Barbara is about to speak to has not yet been released, but we want to give you guys a little bit of an insight about what we're working on and what's coming up next.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Yeah, so thank you for that disclaimer, guys. So if you see bugs during this demo, do not be worried. There won't be the bugs when we actually release this, but we do want to give you something to look forward to next to all the features that we already presented there live. So the first feature was actually requested in one of the earlier webinars that we did for VRM, and it's the opportunity to favorite or star one of your installations. Because when you have a lot of installations in your fleet and one of your installation is actually your own home next to the customer installations that you're managing, because we sort everything alphabetically, it becomes quite difficult to really easily get access to your own home installation or your RV or your boat. And a workaround that we see happening a lot is that people just start naming their installations with exclamation marks in front, or 00 or underscore, even emojis. That works for putting it on top, but it's also not the nicest way to go about this. So what you will see in the future is a little star icon on the dashboard of an installation. And then as soon as you click that, it will make this your favorite installation, and you can favorite multiple installations. This is a personal setting, so you're not impacting any of the other users that are on this installation. And what that will do is that in the installation overview, it will now always show your favorite installations on top of the other installations. And what doesn't work yet, but we're working on it, is to also show it in the top of the navbar, as well as other drop-downs. So when you're setting or where you're adding installations to teams or groups, we could also put it on top of the drop-downs there. So yeah, this is very helpful, and hopefully will lead to fewer sites being called 00 or underscore or sun emoji. So that's one of the features that we're working on right now. And then the second one is also related to managing a fleet. And funnily enough, I saw it mentioned already in the chat just now, is to have the opportunity to add an alarm rule to multiple installations in one go. So in the future, you will see next to adding a new alarm rule for one site, you will see a button that allows you to add an alarm in batch. And most of all the steps are the same as you're used to right now. So let me set up a tank alarm for the fluid level in the tank. The low alarm, I want it to trigger when it's below 10%. And I want it to clear when it's above 15 again. And for the high ones, I'm just going to go with 99 and 98. Then I want to be notified after a minute. And this is new. So now you can click on this button and it will pop up a modal where you can see all of the installations that I can add this alarm rule to. So we're filtering this list based on two things. One, I'm only seeing the installations here for which I am a technician or an admin, because if I'm not a technician nor an admin, I cannot set an alarm rule for an installation. And I'm only seeing the installations that have a tank as a device. Because, we don't really care about any of the other installations because we're setting an alarm for a tank. So we only want to see the installations that have a tank. And what's very nice is that you can also, in one go, set it for the whole installation group. So when you're using installation groups or teams already, you can really leverage the installation groups feature now by adding an alarm to everything in the installation group. I can also select all of them and then just go by the ones that I don't want to see. I can search. So if you really have over 100 installations, that's very valuable because otherwise you're scrolling till no end. And something that we added to tanks and temperature sensor alarms is the opportunity for you to say that you only want to apply this alarm to tanks that have the same fluid type, or for temperature sensors for sensors that have the same temperature sensor type. So that when you're setting up a alarm rule for a freshwater tank, you might want to have different thresholds and different rules than compared to a gray water tank, so that you can differentiate this. So that when I click here, it would only apply it to the other freshwater tanks in this installation. If I don't check this, then it will just set it for all of the tanks in all of the installations. So those are the features that are coming soon, expected in July. Stay tuned for in the what's new in VRM, but also in the Victron community, because when they go live, they will be shared there.
Thanks, Barbara. That's really nice. I think you mentioned something there which maybe we should mention, is that you've been really diligently recently adding new features and updates to the Victron community. So that's probably there's a few different classifications of features inside Victron. It's tricky for us to always know what to send where. So everyone in this room should be subscribed to the Victron Professional News. That's really important things that we think everybody should know about. They should be subscribed in there. But then we're not going to send an email out to everyone for every little feature that we update inside Victron, because it just gets too noisy. And then you just stop reading them. You think, it's some little thing I'm not going to worry about. So we want to preserve the signal to noise ratio is quite high for that Victron Professional News, but there's still interesting things that happen. So definitely recommend checking out the Victron community VRM section and seeing the posts that Barbara are making there. One of the other things that gives you as well is it's not just a one-way channel like the news. You can then also make comments. So if we release a new feature and it's got a problem or a bug, or you wish it was a little bit different or something like that, you actually have an opportunity there to talk back at us and say, hey, I don't like this, or this one's great, or I wish it did this as well. How does it work? It's not working for me. That helps us to work out. We do our best to test as much as we can. We have a testing group and we do lots of internal testing, and I use the site myself every day. So we're all really engaged in what's happening, but it's never the same as when a feature goes live into the field. If you get the chance, please check out the community and that VRM to stay up to date with the latest to what we're doing. So this is something that's been sort of available for a very long time, but because of the way it wasn't very efficient for us on our end to fix, and we didn't heavily promote it. So a few people have had this, and it's not that new, but we have changed it. And what it is, the ability to add your own logo to VRM. So if you have a look, I know the picture's a bit small there, you might have to squint, but basically up the top left-hand side of the VRM, normally there's a little Victron logo there, and it is possible for us to change that logo. Now, to date, it's been part of a whole rebranding effort. So it's been part of this dealer code system that we say, and we allowed people to change colors and fonts and all sorts of stuff. What we're doing now is reducing those option functionality back, because what we found is, for the most part, the main thing that people wanted, in fact, usually the only thing that people really wanted, was their logo to be on the site. And this is if you've got a resale business or something like that, you want to use the VRM, but you also want to have the customer more in touch with your brand and not necessarily the Victron brand for whatever reason, then this is a potential opportunity to do that and still make use of the VRM. Obviously, you don't want to stop using VRM. It's very powerful. But if you want all of your customers to see your logo instead of ours, then this is the potential to do it. Now, the feature itself is there. We have a protocol for how it can be done. It's not manual, like you can't do it yourself. So it's not automatic. You can't do it yourself. It requires a request to us to do it. And part of the reason for that is not just the logo that changes. There's also a code that's linked to that logo. And that is then how customers add it, or your customers add it. And basically what will happen is you'll get a link a special magic link that's specific to you that you can send to your customers. If they use that link to register their VRM account, then that shows up as branded under your brand. So if you onboard someone to VRM, you can use that link to get in there. We are still not 100% sure how we're going to roll this out. So I actually have a little poll that you guys can help potentially shape the future here. Here we go. I'm going to launch the poll. Should pop up. Are you interested in using your own logo inside VRM? Your choices are yes at a low price, yes at an exclusive price. That is, you want the price to be high so that not everyone can do this, but only you or those who are willing to pay a lot of money to do it. Or no, I don't really care. I like it the way it is. I would not bother. Also fine. What I expect will be the majority. But I guess the point is to see how many people think this is a useful thing, what the load will be on the team if we decide to keep this very manual, or is the work worth putting in more work to make it more automated in terms of how we handle this going forward. So please give your feedback on that, and it will help shape how we roll this feature out in the future. How low we make that price depends on how automated we make the process. So basically, if the VRM team is going to be requiring any time to do it, then we're going to need to charge for it because it's disruptive to the rest of their flow. If we find out that it's quite a high number actually here that would be interested in this, it's 45% of the people that have voted, that's quite a lot, then we start to think, okay, maybe we make it more automated in such a way that doesn't require the team ongoing, and then it's potentially possible to offer it for free. The more people that use it also means the more finished the feature has to be, the more polished it has to be as part of the Victron experience. If there's only a few people, they can learn how it works and it's all right to be a little bit rough. If we're just letting people do it themselves, then it has to be a very smooth and clear process about what's going on and how to get it back. If you don't want to have the logo of the company anymore, how you get back to the Victron logo or something like that. There's more things to think about. So it slows us down a bit in terms of how we do it, but very interesting feedback. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you, everyone. I'll wrap it up there on time. I really appreciate all your comments and excellent feedback. Thank you to the team, the VRM team, for attending. Thank you also, Matthias, for making the time, and for all the attendees as well for taking time out of your day to hear more about VRM. There will be a recording of this webinar and a summary provided. I'll send an email out to those that attended. I'll also make a note inside Victron Professional for anyone who missed it in your network that would like to see it. Thank you very much again, and I'll see you later.